For more on today's top political stories, we want to bring in Olivia Gazis and Alex Ward. Olivia is an intelligence and national security reporter for CBS News. Alex, national security reporter for Politico. So, Alex, President Vladimir Putin of Russia had a lengthy speech on state television. Part tedious history lesson, but at the end he said something pretty important. Break it down for us.
So what he did was recognize the so-called Luhansk People's Republic and the Donetsk People's Republic as independent states. And these have been pro-Russian enclaves in Ukraine really since 2014. And in this case, this would allow the pretext for Putin to say that we can protect this region of Russian-speaking peoples if we so choose. And it is a major step as it moves away from years of diplomatic effort to figure out the actual status of this place. But what it really comes down to is Putin told the world, hey, this part of Ukraine in the Donbass, this is they're their own place now. They're not part of Ukraine. And we kind of recognize it, frankly, as a part of Russia.
So, Olivia, shortly after President Putin made that announcement about those two eastern regions in Ukraine, President Biden issued an executive order targeting the same two provinces. What more can you tell us about that?
That's right, Elaine. So the White House said today that it had actually anticipated a move like this and had this executive order ready to go. What it does is it prohibits U.S. persons from engaging in new trade or investment in these two regions, which as a consequence, you can imagine has pretty limited economic sting for anybody, including Russia. It's not the last word. The EU has said that it's going to roll out something. The UK is coming out with something tomorrow. But neither of those, as preliminarily described, sound like they're going to be sweeping or particularly painful sets of sanctions. So it's hard to see how these initial incremental, largely symbolic steps are going to be anything but shrugged off by the Kremlin. All of that said, just this afternoon, moments ago, a White House official said that there are going to be some additional measures introduced tomorrow of the sanctions variety. So we'll see what those are. And all of these actions, they said, were separate and apart from the severe economic sanctions that the U.S. and its partners would levy on Russia in the event of an invasion. Now that there are these very preliminary reports of so-called peacekeeping troops potentially moving in, we'll see exactly what that action triggers.
Alex, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy flew to the Munich Security Conference this weekend, and he used the A word. It wasn't anarchy, it wasn't autocracy, it was appeasement. What did he say about, so far, the support Ukraine has gotten, and what was he pushing for more of?
Well, what he was saying is what actually Republicans in the United States have been asking for, which is you should sanction Russia before an action is taken. You should be strong on Russia before they invade Ukraine. And that's what he was so angry about, because as you know, the Biden administration's case, along with Western European allies, has been only when Russian troops enter Ukraine is that when the sanctions should fall. Their argument was that would deter Putin from entering Ukraine. The reason being that if they were to put the sanctions on earlier, then Putin would feel that he might as well just go into Ukraine anyway because the punishment already happened. So that is what Zelenskyy was quite upset about. And it should be noted that I'm pretty sure Olivia and I were on the same call with a senior administration official not that long ago who basically said, look, we're not sure that if Russian troops enter the Donbass, and especially these so-called People's Republics, if that constitutes a new invasion, because Russian troops have been there for 8 years. They will assess and look at this, but that could mean that this administration does not feel that new sanctions or the larger sanctions that they've been teasing for so long are required if it is true that Russian troops have entered, whether that's some part of a larger gambit to perhaps give Putin the space to just, quote unquote, take those areas and then hope to deter him from doing a full-on invasion, we don't know. But that was a pretty startling comment.
Olivia, I'm so glad you're with us because you can help pull the curtain back a little bit for our audience. As you know very well, because this is your beat, the U.S. gathers all sorts of intelligence about Russian maneuvers all the time. But in this particular last couple of weeks, it has released some of that intelligence to sort of identify what it sees happening. Because this is in part, it seems to me, and maybe those in our audience, at least preliminarily, an information war as much as it is any other kind.
Absolutely, Major. And just today, CBS News obtained a letter that the United States had sent to the United Nations containing what it said was credible information showing that Russia had compiled lists of Ukrainians who were going to be killed or sent to camps following a Russian military occupation. Those people could be dissidents, they could be journalists, they could be religious and ethnic minorities, anybody who opposes Russian rule. And it was a really chilling set of disclosures, although it's worth noting, as with previous such disclosures, evidence for them wasn't really laid out beyond those details. But you're absolutely right. For the past several weeks, the United States and its partners, the UK in particular, has described in unprecedented detail some of the moves, the planning, the intentions that Moscow has here, and especially how it's planning to build its pretext for an invasion. I think the case studies on this in years to come are going to be fascinating in seeing, time is going to tell just how much Russian maneuvering was affected by these disclosures. On the one hand, it's conceivable that the Kremlin has been thrown off by just how public everybody has been about what they know. The actual deterrent effect is a little bit less clear because the Russians have pretty blatantly proceeded with the things that have been forecast, the manufactured crises, the emergency meetings. And so we'll see if these disclosures have actually had a deterrent effect or if they are just a game changer in how the U.S. approaches its sharing of intelligence with the world going forward.
So, Alex, given what Olivia has just laid out here, what realistically is on the table in terms of the U.S.'s potential sanctions here on Russia? Is there any indication at all that Vladimir Putin might view such sanctions, more aggressive sanctions, as a deterrence? And when we talk about these sanctions, are we talking about those around Putin, or would these be directed at Putin himself?
So we don't know in terms of the deterrent effect. At the moment, it doesn't seem to have dissuaded him. It is possible, of course, that, again, if he just goes into the Donbass, that keeping these, mother of all sanctions available to the U.S. and Europe, that maybe he won't go any further. That said, the general leading assessment is that there will be a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, in which case, the sanctions will not have worked and they will be imposed. They are going to go on oligarchs. They're going to target banks. They're going to target Russia's space in the financial sector. Maybe they go after Putin himself and a lot of his own assets around the world. They'll also probably target a bunch of Russian apartments and other financial assets held in London and other major cities. I mean, these are going to be almost personal, really, and towards the inner circle of Russia. But that said, how strong does it matter? Has Russia really held its own by making sure that they have enough resources that they can withstand these sanctions? That's what a lot of people say the Kremlin is banking on. And the other thing we should note here is that the way these sanctions will be put on will vary, not in terms of uniformity or unity, but in terms of time. So the U.S. can move fastest because sanctions are executive authority. Then you can imagine certain European countries on their own following suit because they can't move as fast, but they can move pretty quickly. The ones that will trail are mostly with the EU sanctions themselves. They require unanimity from the bloc. And then once those goes on, those are incredibly hard to take off because they basically require a vote. So it's like a big tanker out there, right, that you can't really move.
Olivia, not a news flash. This is a fast-moving story. Just yesterday, there was a flurry of interest in a potential summit that, in principle, President Putin and President Biden had agreed to, but it would have to be preceded by a foreign minister meeting between Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, and his U.S. counterpart, Secretary of State Antony Blinken. That suggested diplomacy might still be a prospect here, but after this announcement from Putin today, it feels like the diplomatic avenues are either narrowing dramatically or have already vanished.
Absolutely, Major. I mean, the White House has consistently said that it's going to give diplomacy every conceivable shot, but it's hard to see how either of those meetings, the one between Secretary Blinken and Foreign Minister Lavrov or Presidents Putin and Biden, go forward at this point, especially, again, given this fact that we're hearing preliminarily about Russian troop movements into eastern Ukraine. I think, as Alex was laying out, the next intense bout of diplomacy is going to be among Western nations and NATO allies, hammering out, now that the rubber is really hitting the road, what consequences Russia is going to face. Because as we've talked on this program and elsewhere throughout CBS News, I mean, this is not a conflict with only regional implications. The eyes of the world are very much on how the U.S. and how the West respond to this crisis. Chiefly China, which, as you know, its leadership has articulated some troubling historic grievances and dubious territorial claims about Taiwan. So you can bet that countries like that are looking at this, engaging, assessing how they might move depending on how the West and the U.S. respond from here.
Alex, from your perspective and in your conversations with Biden administration officials, is there a fear that if the U.S. and Europe follow through with sanctions, whatever Russia does, those sanctions can be dealt with by Russia aligning itself and getting financial help from China? And essentially, whatever the West does can be counteracted, maybe not entirely, but at least in part, to give Putin the kind of room he needs to continue to maneuver to gain what he wants in Ukraine.
Well, China can certainly help and fill a hole that will be missed by, that Russia will miss from the West, but it can't make Russia whole. China cannot really provide all of the things that Russia needs. And that said, I'm sure Putin is betting on getting some assistance, energy, financial, et cetera. But if Putin firmly believes that somehow China is going to, provide as much as Russian sales to the West and US and European countries, has done in the past, it's not going to work out for him. The other thing to note here is that very recently, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, he said along the lines of, look, we kind of are for Ukraine keeping its territorial integrity and sovereignty. Now, whether that was, sort of a head fake for China because they care about Taiwan and that puts them in the right stance, who knows? But it was interesting to note that in this moment where Russia very clearly feels it's going to get a backer from China, and it probably will, right? That statement between Putin and Xi over 5,000 words probably says more than a statement by Wang Yi. But it is interesting to note still that maybe China isn't fully on board and maybe signaling to Moscow, hey, we're not going to be your number one or at least your ride or die backer here.
CBS's Olivia Gazis, Politico's Alex Ward. Thank you so very much.